Poor woman sacrifices her life, savings to save a stranger, not knowing he's a billionaire. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Emily Green, 28, worked as a waitress in a small Charleston diner. She had big dreams of opening her own bakery, but bills piled up faster than she could save. Living in a cramped apartment, Emily worked long hours for barely enough to get by. Her sister, Laura Green, and their mom always relied on her, constantly asking for money, never directly, but always expected. Emily felt the weight of it all, sacrificing her own dreams to help her family survive. One quiet afternoon, Emily saw Daniel Collins, a sharply dressed man sitting alone in the diner. His expensive suit looked out of place, but what caught Emily's attention was the sadness in his eyes. He wasn't just another wealthy man. Something about him seemed lost. She felt a strange connection to him, like he was silently begging for help. But she pushed the thought away. Later, Emily couldn't resist. She approached Daniel with a simple question. "Can I get you anything else?" The way he looked at her for just a moment made her feel like he wasn't as untouchable as his appearance suggested. There was something familiar about his pain. After a brief exchange, she left, but something about him stayed in her mind. Her day continued like any other, filled with small tasks and texts from her mother, asking for more financial help. Emily sighed. The family she loved constantly drained her, and her own dreams felt further out of reach. She had always been the one to support them. Now she had nothing left for herself. As Emily walked home, the weight of her obligations felt even heavier. She looked up at the bright lights of the city, wondering if she'd ever escape the grind. Then she saw him again, Daniel, standing near a luxury car, looking out of place. There was something about him that drew her in again. This time, she couldn't ignore it. As the days passed, Emily couldn't shake the memory of Daniel Collins. The man she had served in the diner was, in many ways, the opposite of what she had imagined. Her preconceived notions about wealthy men, that they were arrogant, selfish, and disconnected from reality, were challenged by Daniel's presence. Yet Emily was aware that such thoughts could only be fleeting. After all, she was stuck in her own world of bills, family expectations, and unfulfilled dreams. She had no time for fantasies about rich, mysterious men. But one fateful evening changed everything. It was a typical Thursday. Emily worked a double shift at the diner, managing to hold on to a few moments of hope between serving greasy meals and calming the occasional irate customer. At around 9:30 p.m., she noticed Daniel sitting in the corner again, much like the first time they met. His usual aura of melancholy lingered in the air as he sipped coffee, seemingly lost in thought. The restaurant was quieter now, with only a handful of late-night diners left. This time, Emily didn't hesitate. She walked over to his table, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted her apron. "What can I get you tonight, mister?" "Collins?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Daniel glanced up at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Just coffee for now," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Emily nodded and turned to walk away, but stopped in her tracks. Something was off about him. His demeanor, his silence, it spoke volumes. Without thinking, she asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Collins? You don't seem like yourself." He paused before responding, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "I'm not sure what I am anymore," he said, almost to himself. She hesitated, unsure if she should probe further. The weight of the words seemed heavy, and though they weren't meant for her, Emily felt an urge to help, an urge that had led her to sacrifice so many times before. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," she said softly. "But sometimes, talking helps." Daniel's eyes lifted to meet hers, and for the first time, Emily saw a crack in the armor of the perfect, confident man she had once assumed him to be. There was real vulnerability behind his eyes. I guess I've been a little lost, he confessed. Lost in a life that doesn't feel real anymore. I've spent so many years building an empire, only to realize I've built it on the wrong things. And now, I don't know how to fix it. Emily's heart tightened. She wasn't a psychologist, nor did she know how to help someone in his position. But the compassion inside her surged. The feeling was mutual. She too had built her life around expectations, duties, and the weight of others' needs. But unlike Daniel, she had nothing left of her own. Daniel must have sensed the depth of her empathy because he continued, "I've hurt the people I care about. My ex-wife, my business partners. I've made decisions that I'll never be able to undo." Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for him. "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes we make choices because we think they'll lead us somewhere better, but they end up leaving us feeling emptier than before." Daniel studied her for a long moment, as if trying to figure her out. "And what about you?" he asked suddenly. "What's your story?" Emily blinked in surprise. No one had ever really asked her that. Not in the way Daniel had. She wasn't used to revealing herself, especially to someone she barely knew. Still, something about his sincerity made her want to share. "I've been working here for years," Emily began, her words flowing freely now. "I don't mind the work, but I've always wanted more. I've got big dreams of starting a bakery, but it feels like they're always out of reach. I'm constantly playing catch-up with my bills, trying to help my family, and there's never enough left for me." Daniel's eyes softened, and he nodded, as if understanding the weight of her words. "You've been taking care of others, haven't you? Always putting your needs last." Emily nodded, a lump rising in her throat. It was something she had never fully realized until now. How much of herself she had given up. How much she had sacrificed without ever asking for anything in return. "You deserve more," Daniel said gently. "You shouldn't have to keep sacrificing your happiness for others." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Emily could almost believe that Daniel meant them. But reality was harsh, and the weight of her obligations came crashing down on her. She still had a life to live, a future to secure, and family to support. "I have to go," she said quietly, turning to leave. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Mr. Collins." Before she could walk away, Daniel reached out, grabbing her hand. "Emily," he said, his voice suddenly more urgent. "Wait, I want to make it up to you. I don't know how, but I want to help. I know it sounds crazy, but you've done so much for everyone else. Let me help you." Emily froze, confused by his words. "What do you mean?" Daniel's face was earnest, his eyes locked with hers. "Let me invest in your bakery. I can help you get it started. You won't have to worry about bills anymore. It'll be your dream coming true. No strings attached." Her breath caught in her throat. Was he serious? Was this a man she barely knew, offering to change her life with one simple gesture? "I can't accept that," she said, pulling her hand away. "I don't even know you." Daniel smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a man offering help. It was the smile of someone who had made up his mind. "You'll get to know me, Emily. I'm not asking for anything in return. Just give me the chance to make up for some of the mistakes I've made." The offer was tempting. It was almost too good to be true. But Emily hesitated, unsure whether to accept help from someone who had so much power over the life she had been struggling to build. Yet part of her couldn't let the opportunity go. "Let me think about it," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel nodded. "Of course, take your time." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table in front of her. "Here's my contact. Call me if you change your mind." As Emily walked away, she could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on her. Could she really trust Daniel? Would this be her escape, Or would it be another trap in a life full of promises and unfulfilled expectations? As the weeks went by, Emily found herself walking a tightrope between the past and the future. Each step she took seemed uncertain, a delicate balance between holding on to what was familiar and embracing the unknown. But the unknown, particularly when it came to Daniel, was not as terrifying as it once had been. In fact, it had started to feel like a challenge she was ready to face. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed to have his own internal war going on. When he first walked into the apartment that day, his face had been hard, his eyes darkened by the weight of secrets he carried. But Emily could see it now. He was unraveling, slowly, with every conversation they shared. The walls he had built up so high were starting to crumble, and it wasn't just the pressure of his past that pushed him toward her. It was something deeper, something softer. He had begun calling her more often. His texts were no longer just about business, no longer just about the urgent things he needed from her. They were casual at first, a simple, "How's your day going?" or "What's your favorite place to eat?" In those moments, Emily allowed herself to feel the warmth in her chest, the spark of connection that she thought had long been extinguished. But there were still parts of her that resisted. Every time she caught herself thinking of Daniel as more than just a colleague or a stranger who had crossed her path in a time of need, the logical side of her mind screamed at her to pull back. She had been down this road before, the road where hope led to heartbreak. The road that twisted her heart with expectations she had set too high, only to have them dashed by disappointment. But this time, with Daniel, something felt different. Or at least, she told herself that. It was another late evening when he called her again. The sun had set, and Emily was sitting on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city skyline. The cool breeze kissed her skin, and for a moment she felt at peace, her mind still despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "Hey, Emily," Daniel's voice crackled through the phone. "Are you busy?" The sound of his voice still made her heart skip a beat, a reminder of the long nights they had spent talking about everything and nothing. But it was more than that. It was the connection, the raw honesty that had formed between them, a bond she wasn't ready to ignore. "No," she replied softly. "What's up?" There was a pause, followed by a sigh. "I've been thinking a lot," he began. "About everything. About you." Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure how to respond, wasn't sure what he was getting at. But his next words made her heart race in a way she didn't expect. "I don't want to make things complicated," Daniel said, "but I feel like I owe you more than just these late-night calls and awkward silences." Emily sat up straighter, her fingers tightening around the phone. The truth was, she wasn't sure what she wanted. But she knew that whatever this was, whatever they were building, it was no longer just a fleeting connection. It was something deeper, something meaningful. "Daniel," she whispered, trying to gather her thoughts. "You don't owe me anything. You've already done more than anyone ever could." "But what do you mean by that?" Another pause. She could almost hear the uncertainty in his voice. "I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've been hiding behind my own walls for so long. And now, when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to be perfect. I don't feel like I have to wear this damn mask anymore." Her heart softened, and before she could stop herself, she spoke. "You don't have to be perfect, Daniel. You never have to be perfect with me." The words were out before she realized it. She had meant them, truly. But they were also an invitation, a quiet plea for him to let her in more, to let her see the parts of him he kept hidden. She wasn't sure where it was leading, but in that moment she didn't care. There was another silence before Daniel spoke again, his voice hoarse. "I've been selfish. I've kept you at arm's length because I didn't want anyone to get too close. But you've already gotten close, and I don't want to push you away anymore." Emily's heart tightened at the sincerity in his words. It was an admission she hadn't expected. "You've been through a lot, Daniel. I get that, but you're not alone." "Not anymore." Her words seemed to hang in the air between them, a promise that neither of them had fully made yet, but one they both recognized. "I know," he replied quietly, "and I don't want to be." And just like that, something shifted. A shift that Emily couldn't quite explain, but one she could feel in the way her body relaxed, the way her heart opened just a little more. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something important. Something that, with time, might grow into love if they both allowed it. The conversation drifted into comfortable silence as they spoke about mundane things, the weather, the latest news in the city. But Emily couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something significant. The beginning of a relationship that was raw, unguarded, and, most importantly, real. Later that night, as Emily lay in bed, her mind wandered back to that moment on the phone with Daniel. She replayed his words in her head. "I don't want to be perfect." And in that simplicity, she found something that made her heart ache, a recognition that perhaps, in their own way, they were both looking for something more than what life had given them so far. As the weeks passed, Emily found herself more tangled in the complexities of her emotions. The bond with Daniel that had once seemed fleeting, perhaps even a distraction from her pain, had grown into something more significant than she had anticipated. Her heart had softened, bit by bit, with every conversation, every shared glance, and the moments of silence that had, in their own way, spoken louder than words. But as much as she felt the pull toward him, she couldn't shake the haunting thought that this might all be a fleeting moment, a beautiful illusion that might collapse under the weight of reality. Emily knew her heart had been scarred in the past, and she didn't want to let herself be vulnerable again. She had learned the hard way that love could be dangerous. Daniel, on the other hand, had become a constant presence in her life. His attempts to bridge the gap between them, his soft words, his attentive gestures, had started to break down her defenses. Still, doubts lingered. Could this really be real? Was she just a temporary escape for him? A poor woman in need of a savior, or someone to simply fill the void of his life? Emily feared that, deep down, she might just be another charity case for him. But what frightened her more than the possibility of being hurt again was the realization that she might not want to walk away from this. Emily sat alone one afternoon, a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of her, staring out of the window at the distant skyline of the city. She hadn't told Daniel about her fears. She hadn't shared the depth of her insecurity, the way she felt that everything was too good to be true. It was so unlike her to be open with someone, and even more so when she wasn't sure what the future held. She brushed a hand through her hair, thinking of the last few days. Daniel had invited her to yet another dinner, but this time, something had felt different. The way he had looked at her, the sincerity in his eyes, the gentle way he reached out to touch her arm, made her heart race. He hadn't said anything overtly romantic, but there was a softness in his manner, a shift in how he interacted with her. He wasn't the aloof billionaire she had once believed him to be. Daniel was opening up, and it was making her both nervous and hopeful. But hope was dangerous. Hope was fragile, easily shattered. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily couldn't sleep. The room was silent, save for the hum of the city outside. It had become a routine for her to lay awake, replaying moments in her mind. The conversations with Daniel, the laugh they had shared over wine, the way his voice softened when he asked about her childhood. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the growing affection that made her heart swell every time she thought about him. But there was always a voice in the back of her mind, a voice that whispered doubts. Was this real, or was she just another temporary fling? What if he was just using her as a distraction from his own loneliness, his own need to feel something authentic in a world filled with pretense? Her thoughts spiraled. She had seen men like Daniel before, rich, powerful, used to getting what they wanted without giving much in return. Was she just an experiment for him? Was she nothing more than a phase he would eventually move past? And what about herself? What did she truly want out of this? The uncertainty gnawed at her. She had never been good at trusting people, especially not men who came from worlds so different from her own. Daniel's wealth, his influence, it all felt like a barrier she couldn't cross, no matter how much he tried to pull her in. She couldn't allow herself to get too close, to be swept away by the fantasy of it all. She had learned from experience that things like that always ended in heartbreak. Meanwhile, Daniel was struggling with his own set of issues. The more time he spent with Emily, the more he realized how different she was from the women he had known. There was no game with her. No pretense, no need for validation. Emily was real. And that authenticity, that rawness, had made him question everything he thought he knew about himself. He had been chasing success, chasing power. But in all his years, he had never known vulnerability the way Emily had shown him. She didn't seek his approval or try to impress him with her looks or status. She was a woman who had been through pain, who had fought for everything she had. And yet, despite it all, she still held kindness and compassion. It was something he hadn't realized he was missing until he found it in her. But Daniel had his own fears. He had spent his life building walls around himself, walls that kept everyone at a distance. And now, for the first time, he wanted to tear them down. But could he? Could he let himself be seen for who he truly was, without the armor of wealth, status, and success? He had no answer, and that uncertainty weighed on him. But every time Emily looked at him with those soft, searching eyes, he felt the urge to break free from his own walls, to show her the man he was beneath the surface. The fear of rejection paralyzed him. What if she saw the man he was, the one who had made mistakes, who had pushed people away, who had lived a life of privilege but never truly lived? He didn't know if he could face the truth. The following week, Daniel and Emily met for another dinner. This time, it was different. Daniel knew he had to make a decision. The question was whether or not he was ready to take the risk of truly opening up to her. Emily had shown him what it meant to be vulnerable, to trust without fear, and he was beginning to feel something for her that he hadn't felt for anyone in years. He watched her as they sat in the cozy restaurant booth. She was more beautiful than he remembered, her eyes glowing with the reflection of the candlelight between them. There was a quiet strength about her that drew him in, but there was also something fragile, something he wasn't sure how to protect. "I've been thinking a lot," Daniel said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "About us, about where we're going." Emily's gaze shifted slightly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass as if unsure of what to say. "I know," she replied softly. "I've been thinking a lot too." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "And what do you think?" Emily paused. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had been waiting for this conversation, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. "I think," she began, her voice faltering, "I think we're both scared." His heart skipped. "Scared of what?" "Of letting someone in," she whispered, "of letting go of the walls we've both built." For the first time, Daniel felt the walls he had spent his life building start to crumble. The vulnerability in Emily's voice made him want to reach across the table and take her hand, to assure her that he wasn't going anywhere. But he hesitated, afraid that it was too soon, afraid that he would ruin it. But this time, Daniel couldn't hold back. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb gently caressing her palm. "We don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, his voice low. "But I think we should try." Emily's eyes flickered with something, hope, fear, something she hadn't expected. She looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. She wasn't the only one with walls to break down. And for Daniel, he realized that he had already taken the first step. Daniel had never felt so vulnerable in his life. For someone who had spent years climbing the ladder of success, accumulating wealth and recognition, it was a strange feeling to stand exposed in front of someone else, especially Emily. The more time they spent together, the more he realized that this wasn't just a passing distraction, a brief romance to soothe his ego. Emily was different. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or his status. She wasn't there to meet his expectations. She simply saw him. And in return, he saw her. But as much as he tried to convince himself that this was what he wanted, the enormity of what he was feeling terrified him. It wasn't just the fear of losing her, but the fear of what he had to give up in order to truly have her. His world of power, influence, and control had defined him for so long, but in her presence, everything seemed so fragile. Emily had shown him a way of living he had long ignored, one filled with authenticity, humility, and raw human connection. But there was a price for everything, and the more Daniel tried to change, the more he realized that not everyone around him would be supportive of his transformation. His friends, his colleagues, even his family, people who had stood by him for years, were noticing the shift. They didn't understand why he was so invested in a woman like Emily, a woman who didn't come from money, who didn't belong in the exclusive circles Daniel had worked so hard to enter. His mother, especially, had become more vocal about her disapproval. She didn't see Emily as a suitable match for her son, a man who was destined for even greater things. To her, Emily was a reminder of everything Daniel had worked to leave behind: the poverty, the struggle, the insignificance. She had raised him to believe that only someone of equal stature could bring him true happiness, and in her eyes, Emily was the antithesis of that ideal. "Daniel," his mother had said to him over the phone one evening, her voice dripping with concern, "I don't understand why you're wasting your time with her. She's not someone you can build a future with. You know what you need, don't you? You need someone who understands your world, who fits in with the people you associate with." But Daniel was done with her opinions. For the first time in his life, he found himself rejecting the expectations that had been placed on him. He didn't want a life of pretension and empty relationships. He wanted something real, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even his own mother, dictate his choices anymore. He hadn't told Emily about the phone call. He hadn't wanted to burden her with his family's judgments, especially when she was already dealing with her own inner turmoil. But deep down, Daniel knew that the challenge wasn't just his family's approval. The challenge was proving to himself that he could change, that he could be the man Emily deserved without losing himself in the process. Emily, for her part, had her own demons to wrestle with. As much as she had started to trust Daniel, she still couldn't shake the fear that she wasn't enough. Every time they spent more time together, her insecurities grew. She had always been a fighter, someone who had learned to survive on her own terms, but Daniel's world felt so far removed from everything she had ever known. She had never been comfortable in spaces of extreme wealth and power, and she worried that Daniel, despite all his kindness, would eventually see her as an inconvenience. Would he grow tired of her, the woman who wasn't glamorous enough, who didn't fit in with the world he inhabited? And then there were the whispers of doubt that still lingered in her mind. She had heard the stories. She had seen how rich men treated women like her, poor, naive, and desperate for a way out. She didn't want to be that woman. She didn't want to be the one who was left behind once the novelty of their relationship wore off. She had been discarded by others in the past, and the thought of it happening again made her stomach twist. Despite her reservations, Emily couldn't deny the growing feelings inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, about the way he made her feel seen, the way he accepted her without trying to change her. He had shown her a kindness she had never experienced before, a genuine care that reached beyond surface-level attractions. And yet, she still hesitated. Was this too good to be true? Could she really trust him with her heart? Emily's vulnerability, her fear, began to build a wall between them. As much as she longed for the connection they shared, she pulled back. She became distant, uncertain of how to navigate the complicated emotions that were swirling inside her. Her hesitation was becoming palpable, and it didn't go unnoticed by Daniel. One evening, after they had spent a day out together, Daniel confronted her. They sat in the small cafe by the lake, the moon reflecting off the still water as they sipped their coffee in silence. He had been patient, letting her come to terms with her feelings in her own time, but he could feel the distance growing. "Emily," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "I know you're scared, and I get it, but you don't have to do this alone. We're in this together." Emily's heart skipped a beat, but she turned her gaze away from him, staring out over the water. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be." Daniel's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a hint of frustration that he couldn't hide. "I don't need you to be anything other than yourself, Emily, but I need you to trust me. Trust us." She didn't answer immediately. The silence between them stretched for what felt like forever. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid, Daniel," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm afraid that this is all a dream, and I'm going to wake up to find myself alone again." Daniel reached across the table, his hand brushing hers gently. "I'm not going anywhere, but you need to let me in, Emily. I can't keep fighting for us if you're not willing to fight with me." The following days were marked by uncertainty. Emily and Daniel continued to meet, but there was an unspoken tension between them, a lingering doubt that neither of them could ignore. They both knew that something had to change, but neither was sure how to move forward. As Emily wrestled with her fears, Daniel found himself at a crossroads. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every aspect of his life, but Emily had shown him how much he still had to learn about himself and what it meant to truly open up to someone. But with his family's disapproval growing, and with Emily's hesitation pulling him back, Daniel found himself questioning whether he could truly have both, love and acceptance. The deeper they went, the more they both realized that they were standing on the edge of something bigger than either of them had expected. And as the days wore on, both Daniel and Emily knew that one choice, one action, could change everything for them. Emily's mind was a battlefield. The distance between her and Daniel had grown palpable, a wall made of unspoken words and half-hearted gestures. She had pulled away, but not without reason. The fear that had been her constant companion since they met was now louder, almost deafening. She had always known that no one ever stayed forever, that love was a fleeting thing, something that came with a cost. She had seen it in the way her mother had struggled, the way her friends had settled into loveless marriages, hoping to fill the voids with something that wasn't there. She couldn't do that. Not with Daniel. She couldn't let him carry the weight of her insecurities. She couldn't put him through the same pain she had known. And yet, here she was, fighting a battle she wasn't sure she could win. Her silence had grown heavier, more suffocating, as she tried to push him away, to protect him, to protect herself. Daniel had sensed it, the distance, the hesitation. It gnawed at him, pulling at the thread of their connection. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this was different. He didn't want to fight for her heart. He wanted to win it, with no pretenses, no games. But the more he reached out, the more Emily recoiled. It hurt. And yet, he didn't know how to make her see that he was there, willing to take on whatever life had in store for them, even if it meant being vulnerable, even if it meant losing everything. The confrontation came on a chilly evening, the kind where the wind cuts through you, leaving you feeling exposed. Emily sat in the living room of her modest apartment, staring out of the window at the city lights. Daniel had been calling her all day, his messages growing more desperate with each passing hour. He had a right to be frustrated. She knew that. She had been avoiding him, pushing him away, not because she wanted to, but because she was terrified. She heard the knock at the door, the sound of his fist hitting the wood, and her heart skipped. She knew this moment would come. She had been waiting for it, dreading it. But now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to do. Her heart screamed at her to open the door, to let him in, but her mind screamed louder, reminding her of the inevitable hurt that awaited her on the other side of the threshold. "Emily," his voice came through the door, soft but firm. "I'm not leaving until we talk." She stood frozen, her hand gripping the back of the couch for support. Her emotions were in turmoil, a hurricane of confusion and regret. Why couldn't she just let herself trust him? Why was she holding back? After a long moment of hesitation, she opened the door. Daniel stood there, his expression unreadable. But there was pain in his eyes. The moment she met his gaze, she felt her walls start to crack. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, pulling away from the warmth of his touch. "Emily," he said again, his voice tight, as if he was trying to hold on to his composure. "We can't keep doing this. I need to know where we stand. I'm done with the silence. I'm done with pretending everything's fine when it's not." She looked at him, her chest tight with the weight of the truth she had been avoiding. "I don't know what you want from me, Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can be what you need me to be." He stepped forward, his eyes softening. "I don't need you to be anything but yourself, Emily. But I can't keep living in this limbo, wondering if you're ever going to let me in." She could feel the tears threatening to spill, but she fought them back, not wanting to seem weak. "I'm afraid," she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I'm afraid that this, us, won't last, that you'll get tired of me, of who I am, that you'll leave like everyone else has." Daniel's face softened, and he gently cupped her face with his hands, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "You're the one I want, Emily. All I need from you is to let me be there for you. You don't have to carry all of this alone." But Emily couldn't let go of her fears. She pulled away from his touch, pacing in the small living room, her mind racing. "I can't trust that, Daniel. I can't trust that you won't walk away when things get hard, when the glamour fades and the world starts to pressure us." Daniel watched her, his heart aching. "You think I'm with you for the glamour?" he asked, a laugh escaping his lips, though it was bitter. "Emily, I don't need any of that. I don't need the lifestyle, the luxury. All I need is you. And if you can't see that, then I don't know how else to prove it." Emily stopped pacing and turned to face him, her eyes searching his for any sign of deception, any hint that he might be lying. But all she saw was sincerity, something she hadn't known in a long time. "You don't know who I am, Daniel," she said softly, her voice breaking. "You don't know the things I've been through. I don't want to drag you into my mess. You're better off without me." Daniel took a step toward her, his voice firm. "I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now, and I care about what we could be together. That's what I'm fighting for. That's what I've been fighting for." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself fall into his arms and trust that everything would be okay. But there was a part of her that couldn't shake the fear of losing herself, of becoming someone she wasn't. She had been on her own for so long, had fought for everything she had, and she didn't know how to let go of that independence. "I don't know if I can do this," Emily whispered, her voice full of pain. "I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be. I'm scared." Daniel's face softened, his hand reaching for hers once more. You don't have to be anyone else. You just have to be you. And if you can't trust me now, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes, Emily. She stood there, her mind swirling with the gravity of his words. Could she really let herself trust him? Could she really let go of the fear that had been her constant companion? As she stared into his eyes, Emily knew that she had a choice to make. She could either walk away from the one person who had ever made her feel truly seen, or she could let herself believe in something better, something real. With a shaky breath, she stepped forward and took his hand, the weight of her decision settling over her. I'm not sure if I'm ready, she whispered, but I'm willing to try. Emily had never been one to relinquish control easily. From a young age, she had been taught to rely on no one but herself. The harsh realities of life had shaped her into a woman who guarded her heart, with walls built from years of disappointment and betrayal. But as she stood next to Daniel, his hand in hers, she realized something had shifted. Something within her was beginning to break open. A part of her that had been closed off for so long, a part of her that feared love, was starting to trust again. Daniel's gaze never wavered. He didn't press her for answers. He didn't ask her to be anything other than who she was, broken pieces and all. It was something she had never known before. Unconditional patience, unconditional love. But the fear that had taken root in her heart all those years ago still lingered. And though she wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in this moment, the past kept whispering doubts in her ear. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Emily whispered, barely audible. Her voice cracked as she spoke the words she had been too afraid to admit. I'm not sure I can trust that it won't all fall apart. Daniel squeezed her hand, his voice steady and reassuring. You don't have to be ready. You just have to take it one step at a time with me. We don't have to have everything figured out right now. We just have to choose each other every day. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made her heart swell. She wasn't used to this kind of reassurance. She wasn't used to someone offering a future without expectations, without conditions. But there it was, laid out before her like a promise. A promise she wasn't sure she could keep, but one she wanted to believe. But even as Emily clung to Daniel's words, the pressure of perfection loomed over her. She couldn't ignore the whispers in the back of her mind, the voice that reminded her that love wasn't always enough. She had seen it before. The slow unraveling of dreams, the slow burn of disillusionment. It wasn't just the pressure to be perfect for Daniel. It was the pressure to be perfect for herself. In the days that followed, Emily found herself retreating into old habits. She became hyper-aware of her every action, her every word. She second-guessed everything she did, everything she said, wondering if it was enough. Wondering if, eventually, Daniel would see through her, see the flaws she had spent so many years hiding. The small, quiet things that made her feel unworthy. Daniel noticed the change in her. He could feel the walls slowly creeping back up, feel the distance forming between them. He didn't want to push her. He had spent too much time trying to pull her out of herself to risk driving her further away. But it was hard. Hard to watch the woman he loved shut herself off again. Hard to see the person who had opened up to him slip back into the shadows of her past. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Daniel reached for Emily's hand, his eyes searching hers. You're pulling away again, he said softly. His voice was gentle, but the concern was clear. What's going on? You don't have to carry all this alone. Emily looked down at their intertwined fingers, her heart racing. I don't know how to be the person you want me to be, she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I'm afraid that I'm not enough. That I'll never be enough. Daniel's expression softened, and he gently cupped her face, tilting her chin up so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are enough, Emily. You've always been enough. You don't need to be anything more than who you are." But even as he spoke those words, Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't because she didn't believe him. It was because she knew the truth. She had spent so much of her life convincing herself she wasn't enough that it was hard to let go of that belief, even now. She had been telling herself for so long that love was something that came with conditions, that it required perfection. And Daniel, with all his patience and love, was forcing her to confront that belief. And it terrified her. As the days passed, Emily found herself spending more and more time alone, away from Daniel, away from the constant reminder that love didn't need to be earned. She took long walks through the city, trying to clear her mind, trying to sort through the chaos inside her head. Every corner of her mind seemed to echo with doubts, with the fear that the perfect image of herself she had built would never align with the reality of who she was. She wandered into a small cafe, her favorite spot when she needed to think, and ordered a coffee. The warm mug felt comforting in her hands as she sat down by the window, staring out at the world outside. She could hear the soft hum of conversations around her, the clink of spoons against cups. But it all felt distant, like she was looking at life through a foggy glass. "Mind if I join you?" Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts, and she looked up, startled. For a moment she hesitated, but something in his eyes told her he wasn't going to leave until they talked. She nodded silently, watching as he took the seat across from her. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated. He was just there. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice soft but steady. "I've been thinking about all the ways I've tried to push you away. About all the reasons I thought I had to keep my distance." Daniel listened intently, his expression patient, waiting for her to continue. "I don't know if I can let go of all this fear," Emily admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "I don't know if I can be the woman you deserve. The woman I want to be." "You don't have to be perfect," Daniel said, his voice a gentle reassurance. "You just have to be you. I don't need you to be anything but yourself, Emily." She looked down at her hands, her heart pounding. The weight of his words was heavy, yet it was the weight she had been afraid to feel. "I want to believe that," she whispered, "but I'm scared. I'm scared of letting you down, of not being enough." Daniel's gaze softened, and he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Emily, you don't have to be anything but who you are. That's all I want, to be with you, to love you, flaws and all." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. The fears that had held her captive for so long began to lose their grip, just a little. She didn't know if she was ready to give him everything, but she knew she had to start somewhere. "Maybe I can try," she said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Daniel smiled back, his heart swelling. "That's all I'm asking for." As Emily and Daniel continued their journey, they both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles. There would be moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she wasn't alone. She had someone by her side who was willing to wait, willing to love her through the ups and downs, willing to accept her as she was. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she could finally let go of the fear that had kept her locked in a cage for so long. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about choosing to love, even when it was hard, choosing to trust, even when it felt risky, choosing to be vulnerable, even when it scared her. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that leap. As Emily stood in the sunlight, Daniel by her side, she realized that her journey had only just begun. The weight of her past still lingered, but it no longer had control over her. For the first time in years, she felt the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by fear or doubt, but by love and trust. The walls she had built around her heart were crumbling, and in their place, there was room for something new. Hope. Her relationship with Daniel wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But they had chosen each other. They had chosen to embrace the flaws, the uncertainty, and the imperfections. And maybe that's what love truly was. Not about being perfect, but about choosing to show up for each other, day after day, no matter what. Emily turned to Daniel, her hand in his, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. A smile that was full of hope, full of love, and full of possibility. As they walked forward together, she knew that the road wouldn't always be easy. But with Daniel by her side, Emily was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that as long as they chose each other, they could overcome anything. What do you think of Emily and Daniel's journey? Do you believe love can truly overcome fear and doubt, just like they did? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let us know your thoughts and why in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories like this one. Share it with your friends and family, and let's keep spreading the love and inspiration. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.